Well, I am so excited to be here today with my friend, mentor, client, amazing human being, and author, Malia Lazu of the Lazu Group and many other things. We're going to talk about all of the amazing things that Malia has done. Most recently, the author of this incredible book, From Intention to Impact, through MIT Press. She is a lecturer at MIT Media Lab and just a part of the Boston startup, scale up, financial, social justice scene. She's involved in so many amazing things. It is my honor and pleasure to be here with Malia Lazu. We are going to talk about her new book and how you, as a business owner or a leader of a lean team, of something that you want to have a real impact with in your life and business, can bring these principles to not just create more social justice and more justice in the world, but have a bigger impact in your business and life as well. Welcome, Malia.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to be on your podcast. And hello, everyone.
So let's begin at the beginning. What is the main thing that someone can do as a business owner or leader to start having an impact? Where should they begin other than buying your book and reading it cover to cover as I did?
Yes, and doing that several times. Buying it for friends as well. So I think the biggest thing that you can do to have impact is start reflecting on how you value diversity within your own moral compass, right? Within yourself. Because once you understand the value add of diversity, it becomes hard to not include. It becomes hard to not build belonging. It just, diversity makes sense in so many places in our lives. And then this one, all of a sudden, we hem and haw. And if you really reflect on the value of diversity in your life, you'll be able to have an impact in anything you do.
What are some of the ways that that shows up for people, their value of diversity?
In the book, I talk a lot about curiosity. And I think, understanding that other people have something to offer you, right? That they're just not an audience for your life, right? But that they're actually ways to enhance your life. And, in my research, I found this awesome, incredible definition of curiosity with the Cherokee Nation. And I'm going to paraphrase, but the idea is that your life becomes better by getting to know someone else, right? By being curious, and it's a core value of the Cherokee Nation, and I think we would think it's a core value of ours, but we don't seem to prove that. So things like getting curious about who feeds you, right? About what you eat, about why you eat it, right? About who has helped you live a long, wonderful life, right? When you start really looking at all of the cultures in this world that have contributed to build America, and build the United States,
And Canada.
um, and Canada, right? Not being a citizen of Canada, you can help me understand what you all do, but I'm sure it's similar to what we do here, right? Like, um, but we have this wonderful concept of the West because of our global, good or bad, right? But because of our global interconnectedness. And I think us really valuing and starting to see like what our life would be if we weren't diverse, can really help you start seeing the bigger picture.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It brings to mind the Buddhist teaching of codependent arising, that everything is connected with everything else. And, we have this idea that we exist on an island all by ourselves and we kind of bring our groups together as we'd like. But the real picture is much richer and involves many other groups that we think of as not connected to us, but fundamentally are part of our experience in a fundamental way.
That's right. That's right. And we can actually measure some of it, right? Like we know who and how railroads were built. So, right, like we understand how cotton was picked. We understand, who actually participated in our growth. And I think that's part of what makes it hard to talk about, but that's what makes it so important to talk about.
Absolutely. And just a point on the Canadian side of things, I came to this country by way of America, so I knew nothing about Canada. You just sort of figure it's a bunch of white people who all came here from England and France, but the reality is much more diverse. It's much more checkered in terms of real equity, right? People think, well, Canada was the end point of the Underground Railroad and don't remember that there were plenty of people in Halifax shipping African Americans who thought they were free or even who were free
That's right.
back to their back to the South.
That's right. And the healing that Canada is exploring around Indigenous, right, and First Nations peoples. I actually so I'm a true crime, like little aside, but I love true crime. I'm one of those people. And the Canadian Broadcast Company, the CBC, has some great crime stories on the missing Indigenous people. There were women, trans Indigenous women. Like that's how I was able to see, oh wait, we're actually very similar because our narrative started from the same place, right? England and France, they had this idea of manifest destiny, right? They were doing their European Enlightenment experiment, and so everyone else was a heathen if mentioned at all. And that is what we're trying to deconstruct, whether it's in ourselves, our business, or our country.
Yeah. So one of the things that really struck me from the book was the idea that diversity, equity, inclusion is not just, you say it's not just charity. I would even say it's not just the right thing to do, but it's also good for business. So how can you kind of fill in some of those points, for the
And
hardened
that
capitalists out
even how
there?
you lay it out, right? It's almost like it feels like there's when people listen, right? Or, as you listen to these words, you may even put values on, well, we should be doing it because it's the right thing to do, right? Listeners might be doing that. Like, but the fact of the matter is a lot of decisions we make in business are not because it's the right thing to do. And I will get into that conversation, right? If we want to talk about responsible business, great. We can go right back to DEI as well, right? But this idea of, oh, well, we're doing it because we're, the white saviors, right? A la charity, or, we're doing it because I find it in my soul. It's the right thing for us to do. But I show up to work every day to get paid. And I may do things at work that I wouldn't do every day, not that cross my moral line, right? But like if I win the lottery, I'm not going to work a lot, right? Like I work because I'm in a capitalist structure that requires my labor in order for me to pay for things. And the idea that that shouldn't be a notion in DEIB misses the whole point of diversity in business, right? Like Deloitte, McKinsey, these studies show is that diversity is profitable, whether it's about entering new markets, or baseline profitability, right? Citibank has showed that bias is costing us $14 trillion. These aren't numbers coming from the NAACP or from, the National Organization of Women, right? These are numbers that are coming from the business sector, right? Like the white boys that do this, right? And what they're saying is we are missing out. We are leaving money on the table because we think straight white men are the only ones who have the ideas. And when you hear it like that, yeah, we must believe that there's no way we could be getting all the ideas, right? So, with my book and really with the business that I do, as a Black woman, yes, I want you to like me because I'm human and it's the right thing to do to feel that interconnectedness. But I don't like everyone I work with, right? And like that's not why we come to this place. So value what I bring to business, value the fact that we will make more money together, and then let's split that, right? Let's all live off of the profits. And let's work our way up corporate ladders, right? But Um, and so, yeah, so that's where, I think businesses and of any size, right? I mean, these numbers don't just apply to Bank of America, right? If you're looking at entering new markets right now, you should have people that speak different languages, right? You should have people who understand this new emerging America. You should have young people, right? Who understand what it means to build a community through technology, right? You're going to need all that wherever you are in the world, in order to be able to reach your local or global economy, which you can have a reach at.
Yeah. Well, and I love how you kind of you point out the bias that we have even in the idea that this is the right thing to do or I should be doing this, because those ideas miss the fact that you are a badass. Like your mug says, uh, don't hire Malia because you should have a more diverse, set of contractors with your company. Hire her because she's absolutely amazing. And like seeing talent through that lens of, am I because of unconscious bias seeing talent as only looking a certain way or acting a certain way, talking a certain way, coming from certain educational backgrounds? Probably yes, right? I think that one of the powerful things in your book, like one of the starting points, is acknowledging that racism exists and that it exists within you, like it exists within all of us. We're kind of in this milieu and beginning from it's in there. How is it, how is bias coming out from me? How am I building a life of unconscious bias? And hopefully not terribly conscious, but like, certainly everyone has it unconsciously to some degree, is a powerful jumping off point. And without that, you're going to feel on the sidelines of, this kind of value creation and this cultural moment as well.
That's right. That's right. And you're missing out on the zhuzh of life.
Don't miss out on the zhuzh.
Don't miss out on the zhuzh, whether it's in your business model, and that's one of the, it's, as I said before, it's common sense, right? Like your diet is diverse, right? If you try to grow any food, right? Like, right? Like, it's, you should grow for food in a diverse way, right? That's the best way to do agriculture. We have a diverse ecosystem. You have a diverse family tree, right? Because that's how important biodiversity is, right? And genetic diversity, like, so for us to all of a sudden say it doesn't make sense here, I think shows that unconscious and implicit, right? We just have this narrative of who's smart, who's not, who's good at dancing, who's not. And we just move forward with that narrative, like not actually questioning why that doesn't make sense anywhere else in our lives but here.
Mhm. So we began the conversation with
Maybe monogamy. I don't want monogamous to come for me. That might be a fulfilling life too.
You're funny. Um, so we began the conversation with what should someone who is responsible for a lean team for a business do to begin or to kind of amplify their diversity efforts, and you responded with being curious about the importance of diversity. As someone is looking to build this into their business, right? If you're a small business, small team, it seems like the pressures of the day, the kind of necessities of keeping the organization going take up a lot of space. And the room for like culture change and curiosity and listening and like the things that you say will create a stronger organization in your research and in your book. Um, those almost feel like nice to haves. Like, how can someone shift their perspective on really bringing this work to the core of their business rather than to the someday at some point?
Yeah, um this is again, I think, one of these like false choices, right, that we put ourselves in. So when I was starting my company, or even when I was at the bank, right? I didn't have problems bringing diversity and building belonging, right? Whether I was starting my company or in a larger company. And the reason for that was I'm not the only kick-ass woman of color I know, right? Like I know a lot of kick-ass women. I know a lot of kick-ass people of color. Sometimes they come as a twofer, right? But because I have a diverse ecosystem, this idea of bringing in, someone who can help us, get into a Hispanic consumer market, and is also, great at the numbers, right? Can be done. And so I think it becomes a choice because of a segregated ecosystem or networks. And then you have to make the choice. And, I talk in the book a little bit about the 7 stages, and there's 7 stages, and 3 of them are about pushback. Because that is an example of what seems like legitimate pushback, but is actually based in white supremacist culture, right? The fact that you think it's a nice to have shows that you don't actually truly understand the value of what women bring, of what people of color bring, of what LGBTQ people with disabilities, right? So if you actually understood that women-led teams have 21% more patents in Silicon Valley, then you wouldn't you wouldn't, you would make the time, right? Like the priority would be there. And you would see it as an investment, right? Because you know that it will help you pay back your investors quicker, right? So I think we also, like we're like, well, where's data? And then the data is there and we still don't do it, right? And again, it's about, do we truly understand the value, right? And I think for startups or for lean businesses, again, I have like Steve can tell you, I'm a client. I have a lean business and I try to make it leaner every day. And but it's important to realize that if you are looking for the best of the best, which you are if you're lean, because that's how you can be lean, right? You don't have space for bureaucracy and a lot of redundancy, right? Then you need to get the best of the best. And if you're sitting in a room of 3 straight white guys and a lady, right? Like you may actually not have the best of the best of the best. And it's not to judge you, right? Like, we talked about this, for me, my company was, and still is even in my vendors, but when I had staff was all women, and I would joke around like, this is why I have white male vendors, right? Because like I need a different experience. Like I need, white men looking at my business. I need that lens, right? And that's why I spent money on that, right? Because I had the diversity with me, right? What I didn't have was the folks who built these roads, right? Who are going to look at my business in a different way. And I understood the value of that, right? Now I did not need to center it in my business in any way, right? Like, because America, the US capitalism centers that already, but understanding the value, I think even if you're a lean team, you understand, well, if I want the best of the best, and I might actually even be able to get them for some equity and what have you, because they are a lost Einstein, right? Everyone's going after the bros and like no one's noticing the hidden figures, right? Who are out there actually building these things.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And exactly, I love how you point out that it's a false choice, right? And so one of the core points that you have in the book is about self-reflection, honesty with where you're at and how you're seeing things. And so I would just to kind of emphasize your point, if you find yourself as a business owner thinking, well, I'd like to have more diversity, but I'm kind of busy right now, reflect on, you know, is
Why
that
do you
true or
need
is
so
that
much
vital?
time?
Yeah.
Right.
Mm.
And that's, I want to like play that out because I think, right, people are like, oh, great, well, I am busy. And so now I can add this on my I'm a shitty entrepreneur list, right? The shit, like, don't shame yourself with this conversation, right? Don't be, and that's something I try to reinforce in the book, right? Like, that doesn't help anyone, right? But it is interesting to think about, well, why would it take me so much time to find competent people of color or competent, women, or, attract them and retain them, right? Why is that hard for my company? And, I talk about in the book, one of the first questions I ask my client is, why do you need me? Right? Why weren't you able to do this on your own? You're a nice person, right? You like people. So why weren't you able to do this, right? And it's because of systems, institutions, and implicit biases, right? And it's, the stat that I found in the book that was just, it was one of these stats that I had to like text like my white friend, like I had to be like, do y'all know this? But it was 75% of white families or white people polled said that they don't have one non-white friend. And as someone who has white friends, like, I don't know, like, if y'all are just hoarding, right? Like, because y'all don't just have one, right? I've met dope people of color through your network, Steve, right? Like, who I didn't know before I met you, right? So it was just this shocking stat of, who are these white people, right? Like who, and they're the suburb, I'm not labeling, right? But they're people who don't have a chance to be in proximity with others. And, I think about my mother, who was born and raised in Lake Hiawatha, New Jersey, this beautiful like lake town that became a permanent town. Think Levittown, post World War II, right? A lot of folks were moving there to get their white picket fence, Catholic schools, right? Like that sort of neighborhood in New Jersey. My mom saw her first Black person when she was 5 years old. And she ran into the house and she said, look, it's a chocolate covered man, which we joke about, right? Like that
Oh
was
my
that
God.
was like the preface, right, for me being born. But she didn't see a Black person again until she went to Newark, New Jersey. And that kind of day-to-day segregation, right? For a child, right? I mean, because she saw Black people once she was old enough to get out, right? And she could take the bus, right? And she could go to places. But for her young life, this was a completely foreign community, right? I mean, it might as well have been Africa. And I think we don't understand how that still exists. My mom's not that old, right? Like that still exists today. I have cousins who they might see more Black people on TV, but they may only be seeing the garbage man,
Mm.
right? They may only be seeing good laborers and not understanding that the, person who invented the bypass surgery that their daddy got, right? Or the first artificial heart, right? I think what was a Black man. So, that's where it becomes hard and where it becomes time consuming, because you may actually not know these folks. And but then that's the self-reflection part, right? Again, don't beat yourself up, but just, where can you go?
Yeah.
How can you expand? How can you make your life richer?
Well, exactly. And that's my experience of it as well, that the diversity that I have in my life is a key part of what makes it rich. And that the friends that I have who don't look like me and don't share my background are an amazing source of not just information about the world, but like connection and like the spark, the zhuzh. It's a big source of real love and connection in my life is people who are people who have much different experiences who sometimes just because of how they look and also because of their family and their historical background as well.
Exactly. Getting to learn new things is fun.
Yeah. right? On its own, right? Regardless of the business benefit. So I love that emphasis there that it might require some work. It might require some time and effort to create those connections, to build those bridges, to find out where those communities exist. That's one thing you speak about in the book is there are communities of the people that you want to have in your business. Find them,
Yeah, if
listen
you
to
want
them.
accountants, I
Yeah.
tell you right now, there's an LGBTQ accountant association, there's a Black accountant association, there's a Latinos, and there's a woman accountant association, right? All of these places exist, and becoming comfortable and just reaching out, doing the 3 L's, right? Which I talk about in my book, which, so the 3 L's
Yeah.
came about because after George Floyd, we were reeling. I mean, all of us were reeling, right? The white community was reeling as well. Well, parts of the white community. I'm not going to overly give over credit, but it just shook a lot of people, as it should have, right? You shouldn't be able to watch that video and be like, I wonder what he did, right? Like you should be outraged at that video. And so, we were getting so many calls about like, oh, Malia, what can I do? What can I do? And as you know, because we were able to, the narrative went there, right? It was like, well, you can first stop burdening us with helping you figure out what you can do when this happens, and we're reeling because Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, right? I mean, how many, it was like boom, 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 boom. And then George Floyd. And so listen, learn, love, became sort of like my emergency response, right? It became like, what is it? Like, see something, say something, right? Like,
Yeah.
what should I do? You should listen, learn, love, right? Like, so the first L is listen. And that is just old school, like how your mom told you, if you're talking, you're not listening. And listen to what these communities have been saying, right? There's a narrative of US Black people, Canadian Black people, right? For about 400 years. Right. So listen to that. What have they been saying? What are they saying today? What is the same? They may be asking for some of the same things, right? Listen to that. And then come in to learn what you can do. Come in to learn about the community, right? But you've already done a little cultural understanding, consideration. You've recognized that these folks that have lived a different experience than you, and therefore you need to learn about them, right? You don't burden them with teaching you, right? You learn about them like any good traveler. And then you take loving action, not just action. I think it's Ida B. Wells maybe said, don't mistake motion for progress. There is action that lets a community know that you know what they need, that you want to help them. And then there's action that helps you feel better about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure we've all been in relationships where, where we felt both, right? Where we felt a quote unquote action to make you feel better that really wasn't about making you feel better. And then you felt those actions that let you know the person heard you, right? That they actually want to have you not feel that way anymore, right? And that's loving action. And whether you're a small company or a big company, you can take the action that's relevant to the community, right? Jamie Dimon taking a knee and sticking his fist up in the air is not what the Black community was asking for, right? They were asking for the George Floyd police reform bill, which was the Michael Brown police reform bill, right? Which was the Oscar Grant police reform bill, but, to take it all the way back into the 2000s, right? Early 2000s. So this idea of, here's Juneteenth as a holiday, like the only reason why Juneteenth is a holiday and why, folks even know about Juneteenth is because that was the next thing Black people were doing after George Floyd was killed, right? It was not reflective at all. It was a reaction. It wasn't a response. So you want to learn from the community what you can do that will bring them relief that they're asking for, and then do those things.
Mm-hmm.
right? Like signing a pledge is great, but your Black employees or folks you're trying to attract or your Black customers would rather see you do something than sign a pledge, right? They would rather see you, buy paper from a Black vendor than sign a pledge, because at least that one Black vendor's doing all right, right? Getting a job. Like, we care more about that than watching you do Wakanda cosplay.
Yeah. When you talk about taking loving action, one of our themes is that business is a spiritual practice. And that means it has some element of transformation, where if you weren't awake to the needs of others and you were taking action that was more about you, that to actually become aware of the needs of others and to take actions that show, I see you, I hear you, I care about you, that is creating more love in the world. That is a spiritual practice through the vehicle of business.
Well, and that's what I love too about the framework that you bring to this work, right? Because for most people, like, yes, there are some people in this world who are just about greed and, want to be able to go to Mars and have us just send them the last bit of resources we have so they can live and do all that stuff. But most people, if you're starting a business or even working at a company, you have a passion there, right? There's, even if you're doing it so that, your kids can have a better life than you, right? Like, and that's the motivation. And there is a passion and there is you there. So at the end of the day, it should be a spiritual practice, right? Because you're showing up there. And relationship is the core of any, I don't care what you're selling, what you're doing, whether it's relationships with your employees, your customers, or your investors. Being good at building rich relationships is good for business, and that takes a spiritual, right? However you want to define a spiritual practice, a higher practice, right? um the best people, right, that we talk with or that we have relationships with, right, are probably the people that are the most grounded, right, with themselves and with their power, and tying that into however they define their interconnectedness, right? You were talking about how Buddha talks about it, right? But we all, any culture, right, that there's this interconnectedness, this fifth note that gets created when we start singing together. Is that what it's called, right? The fifth note
Sure.
in
I mean,
a cappella?
as a musician, it's the overtone. It's the
The
overtone.
overtone, that's what it's called,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I'm sure it's like if you've got four people singing, then there would be a fifth note, and that would be the
Right,
overtone.
like there was, yeah, because I learned about that with a cappella. Like, if when they're singing, there's actually another
Oh yeah.
that comes in that isn't, but yeah, and that's spiritual, that overtone.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. So earlier on, when we were talking about ways to build these relationships, ways to create real diversity in your business. And of course, you go much further into, what is equity, what is inclusion, what is belonging? Because if you just have diversity, you still don't have that fifth note. It's just like, I got a bunch of people together, didn't I do my job? So there's a lot more to it. But I think one of the points of pushback, you're kind of in those middle stages of the 7 stages, is the idea of reverse discrimination. Well, if I'm out there hunting for all these, people of color and all these females and all these people from, what about the straight white men? This is discrimination against me. I mean, and that's, I hear those thoughts going through my own mind as someone who, tries to be an ally.
Right.
What do we do about those thoughts, either within ourselves or in the teams around us?
Yeah, and we first have to acknowledge and appreciate those thoughts, right? Like, when you're privileged, equity can feel like a step down, right? And especially when you have a narrative that's telling you about your own irrelevance, and not telling you to buck up and compete with the rest of the world, right? Like, that's a privilege unto itself, because I'm told about bootstraps and shit, right? I'm told to put on my big boy pants, and that's business, baby. That's how it works. So compete, right? Like you're right. We're literally talking about everyone who's not a straight white man. Like, yeah, we are, right? Like, but once we understand that that's a knee-jerk reaction because of the narrative in order to make the US or the Western European experiment work, you had to believe that about yourselves, right? Like, how do you enslave human beings, right? If not to believe you must be better than them. So understanding that that's a first reaction.
Yeah.
But if you actually are managing a team right now, right? Or you're trying to work your way up the ladder, don't you want a team around you that's going to be 34% more profitable and 70% more likely to enter a new market? Right? Like, it in no way replaces you, it betters you. And now, does it mean that there's different people applying for jobs, so there's increased competition? Absolutely. So again, buck up, soldier, put on your big girl pants and compete. Right. And so, you know, and that comes up for my clients all the time, and I will bring it up because, you know, I have white men in my life that ask me this question, right? That really mean it. Are like, okay, I'm feeling away, you know, like, and I want to be can I be in my feelings as a straight white man for a second? Of course you can. Right? Of course you can ask yourself about your irrelevance, right? Ask yourself about that. Why are you worried? Right? Why does this make you feel like you're going to be replaced? Right? And go through that, but you can't center, right? I always say, like, I will help deconstruct white discomfort, but I'm not going to slow down, right? We're not going to actually call that legitimate pushback, right? So, you know, Steve is feeling, and I'm going to use you as an example, Steve, because you're a friend, right? Steve is feeling a certain kind of way. Great. Let's give Steve a space, not the space, right? Let's give Steve a space to reflect, and maybe even invite Tad and, you know, Tom, right, to come in. And let's bring in a white ally coach, right? And let's help white folks who are feeling like they're being made irrelevant. Let's help straight people, right? There's LGBTQ ally coaches, right? Let's help straight people understand why it's not that hard to work through a pronoun, right? You can have those spaces. I mean, I know for myself, right? Like, I have learnings as we evolve, right? That I need to do, because as a straight white woman, I mean, Black woman, I don't know it all either, right? I'm able-bodied, I'm straight, I'm educated. Like, there's things I need to learn as well, you know? So, you want to be able to understand, you know, that you are going to have those feelings, you are going to come short, but the person you want to be, right? You actually want to have a fulfilled, amazing life, and working through these ideas of your own irrelevance at any level will help you live a better life.
Absolutely. I think that's brilliant that like we would characterize that in the Superabound framework as your own static, right? That feeling that is kind of in between you and the vision that you have. If the vision is more justice, more beauty, more connection in the world, and you're feeling, but what about me? Won't I become irrelevant? This is all too scary. That's static, and there's wisdom there, but it shouldn't be in the driver's seat, right? We don't want to center that or make it the main point of the conversation, but let's take some time, discover the wisdom so that we can make it conscious and not let it impede the progress.
That's right.
Brilliant. What should people know that they don't? Like, what question are people not asking right now about this conversation?
You know, I think, do I really want to do this? Part of what I tried to do in the book was really take an honest approach, right? Because we need outcomes here, right? Platitudes, check boxes, all of those things, they only work if we want this to be a sustainable notion, right? Or else we're going to have to, you just, again, the 7 stages, right? You sort of stay in the first 3 stages, which is, signing pledges and doing trainings, right? And you don't actually work through the pushback. And I think we start off with this question of, well, of course, I'm a nice person. I want to do this, and so, I mean, maybe the question is, how can my niceness help me be less biased? And really try to connect those 2 dots, because right now they're not connected, but people think they are. So you think because you're nice, but you don't realize that even the very choice of where to live may have white supremacy in it.
Hmm.
Right. So now, do you want to, oh, do I want to think about that about myself? You might not want to. And then if you don't, that's fine. But then don't say you're doing the work. Just say, I don't know. My feelings got too hurt. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Because then at least we know who we're working with. All right. One of the things I so appreciate about my white friends, you included, is how you reflect on your own limitations, right? And the limitations of your own experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really nice, right, to actually see that behavior modeled by white people, right? By straight white men, right? And I think, especially, I mean, but we all have, right? We all have privilege, we all have bias, blah, 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 blah. But, I see the exhaustion sometimes, right? Like sometimes it's exhausting. And maybe we don't talk about that stuff enough, right? Maybe we need more spaces where, allies can talk about. I mean, when I work with disability community, I feel so ableist, and I come home and I'm like, this is what white men feel, and use this as your empathy towards white men, because this is how they navigate. The ones who want to do it right are just like, oh God, it's even in the goddamn walk sign, right? Like you're just seeing it everywhere. And it can get exhausting. So, be having that honest conversation. Do I want to do this? Do I want to, am I ready to maybe be called a racist or a sexist, or, how fragile am I? I think these are questions that we more ask, of the questions of how can I do it? We don't ask the questions of, am I the one? Do I have the talent? One last thing about this, because now I'm going to go on a little read. I'm sorry, but we have common communities. When Mass Challenge first was starting to talk about, and this is things I said publicly, so this isn't, it's not a read I haven't done publicly before. But when Mass Challenge said that they were going to start doing diversity things, I asked them, why do you think you're the right one to do this?
And they're a startup incubator based in Boston.
Yes, thank you, Steve. Yes, that helps with this conversation. And so they said, we're going to go find all the diverse businesses, and we're going to like blah, blah, blah. And they're going to get, and they have this $1 million challenge or whatever it is, right? And, oh, we're finding the Black Google. First of all, they have yet to find the Black Google. But second of all, I can't name more than 2, and I can name one if I need to name one right now, but more than 2 Black businesses that I know of that came out of Mass Challenge. Now, I'm not saying that more haven't. I'm sure they have, but the point is, the reason why Mass Challenge actually didn't help the culture, right? It didn't help the community, is because they thought that what they were doing was good enough. Mm-hmm. And all they needed was to get Black bodies in there, and they would be able to do this work, and that's just not how it works, and I think these questions about what don't I know, where are my own inadequacies, are we the right people to be doing this, right? These are all the questions. What do I need to gain in order to be effective at this? How does this lead to professional development for my team? Right? These are the questions that you want to ask, because if you don't have answers for those, you're not going to have answers for the pushback when someone says, oh, so are we going to hire less qualified people because we got to hire the ladies? You'll be like, no, actually, most women are overqualified for the positions they have. So we think we can poach hella ladies. And that's what you'll say.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very grounding to have that introspection at the heart of it. Like what am I willing to do for this? How much do I want to, again, not just like do the right thing, but actually have a better experience of life, a better experience of business, in part because you're doing the right thing, but also in part because it's just better. And I think that's a big part of this conversation. I love that the pushback is right within your framework, because I'm very aware of that. All the people who, you know, say, "Oh, we're being replaced. It's a left-wing conspiracy." You know, weaponizing the word woke. All the ways that you kind of can shy away from, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Right? There's a lot of pushback, but it's
Right.
like,
Like the very idea of reverse racism. Like, you obviously don't understand what racism is if it can be reversed, right? So like prejudice exists in all of us, right? Like racism is about power. Right. So racism is that you can exclude me from a school because of my skin color. So the idea that Black people or women could be, reverse sexism, where have I ever stopped men from doing anything, including taking rights to from my body away?
Mhm.
Right? Like, where have Black people ever stopped white people from doing anything, including shooting them down in the street? Right? If we had any power, trust me, it wouldn't be to stop Bob from getting his middle management job.
Well said, Bob. Sorry.
Sorry. And Bob, and I have a stepdad, Bob, and I'm going to say that's who I was talking about, and I love him to death. And he is a white guy who, jokes around with me and will be like, oh, please, like, what about us? And so I have that lovingly in my family too. And as I told him, compete, Bob.
Compete. Right. And I think for me, the really energizing part of this is expecting the pushback, embracing the pushback, knowing that some of it's going to come from within as we kind of resonate with some of those messages as being part of the privileged community, in whatever ways you identify with that. I love how you point out that you have some of those as well with education, able-bodied. We had this conversation with our kids just this morning. It's like becoming aware of our privilege allows us to be ready for the pushback, internal and external, that we will experience on our path to creating a better business and a better life, is what we're actually talking about here.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. Where can people go to get all things Malia Intention to Impact?
Yes, you can go to the lazugroup.com, and you can see the book and our cultural heritage calendar and different things we have for small businesses, because we know sometimes, you're the chief cook, bottle washer, and DEI officer. So we have some great tech that can help you bring that into your company. You can also find me on all the socials at Malia Lazu. And you can also find me in Roxbury in Boston. So come and check me out. And if you got something to say, come on to Roxbury and say it.
That's right. I miss Boston. I miss being down the way from you there.
I know you guys gotta make it a point to just, you guys don't come back enough. That, like, you guys should do like a 4-day weekend every 6 months, like, just because then, it needs to get into the kids' lexicon too. They need to, know the neighborhoods and, get in all that.
Yeah, our daughter was born there. She's a Bostonian at heart.
Yeah, so she needs to take the tea more often.
Exactly. Well, Malia, thank you so much for being here today and sharing the wonderful work that you've done. It's going to help lots of leaders and business owners create better businesses, better teams.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. Take care.